This video will give us a little practice in avoiding plagiarism. We're going to look at some examples, and I want you to read them and tell me whether or not the example is plagiarized or not. So first, let's look at the original article. This is a passage from an article on the quarterback Tom Brady by a sports writer named Tom Pelissero. So here's the original source. I'll read it through. Tom Brady, 38, is past his physical peak, but he was never winning with athletic ability anyway. He has avoided major injuries since blowing out a knee 7 years ago. He plays in an offense that emphasizes a short passing game, limiting wear and tear on his arm, and his knowledge of how to read and manipulate defenses only increases with time. Okay, so let's take a look first at example A, and I'd like you to pause the video, read that, and tell me whether or not you think it's plagiarized based on that original passage that I just read. So you can pause the video now. All right, coming back, this is an example of plagiarism. And the reason is that there is no citation of the original source, which remember is by a guy named Tom Pelissero, and it's using pretty much the same language. They've just changed some words here and there. So instead of saying physical peak, they say physical prime. Instead of saying winning, they say victorious. Instead of saying athletic ability, they say athletic skill, right? Instead of saying major injuries, they say significant injuries. So you can see what they're doing. They're just putting in a few synonyms and calling that, putting it into their own words, which is not. So this really should just have been, if they were going to be this close to the original, a quote of this passage with a signal phrase that had the author's name in it. So this is mosaic plagiarism. All right, let's look at B next. Pause the video, read that, see if you think that's plagiarism or not. Okay, this is plagiarism because it's literally identical to all but the last sentence in the original, which it doesn't use. So it is using exact words. Now, this is someone who's put a citation at the end, and a lot of people think, well, I've said where it came from, so that's good enough, and that is not good enough. You cannot use the exact words from a source without putting them in quotes, even if you do have a citation. So this should have been in quotes, right? It really should have. So that is plagiarism. All right, let's look at C here. Pause the video and see if that is plagiarism or not. So coming back on this one, it is also plagiarism because even though they've got a little setup phrase right here, the rest, once you start with this, is again just all exact language. It should have been in quotes. Now they're putting in citations at the end of some of these sentences, but again, that's plagiarism because it's exact language without it being in quotes. So that's not acceptable. That's plagiarism. So even though they have a signal phrase and they have parentheses after each sentence, it's still exact wording. So it's plagiarism. All right, how about D here? Take a look at D, pause the video, and then we'll come back and talk about it. All right, this is not plagiarism because they've provided a signal phrase with the name of the author, and then they've just used quotes around the passage, right? So they've quoted it, they've said who wrote it, so that's one of the ways that you can avoid plagiarism, is just to quote it and say who said it, right? What the source is. Okay, so that's a good one. That would be acceptable. Let's lastly look at E. So pause the video, read E, and see if you think that's plagiarism. All right, coming back, E is not plagiarism because even though they aren't using quotes, they're still giving credit here in each sentence to the author, right? And they're really changing the language. I mean, every sentence is a completely different structure from the original. When you compare that original, the last one, you do not see very many similar words at all. The sentence structure is different for each. You know, the lead-in sentence is different. So this is someone who really has successfully put the source in their own words, and they've given credit to the source. So that's the other way you can avoid plagiarism. So basically, the way you avoid plagiarism, as we're seeing here, is you always give credit to the source, and then you either quote the exact words or you truly put the words in your own wording, which means not only different words, but a different sentence structure. And if you do those things, then you're going to be just fine in terms of avoiding plagiarism.